Sonic Boom Comic Issue 11. After seeing Styx and Worlds Unite, I'm actually pretty excited to read this. I've been waiting to for a really long time, but couldn't because Worlds Unite was in the way. And it'll be nice to see Styx again for one last time. The story will probably disappoint me again, though. This is supposed to be the grand finale of the comic, but I'm willing to bet it won't involve getting rid of Eggman and giving Orbot and Cubot a happy ending, even though they know it's the final issue. Because that'd be awesome and respectable. We start out with Eggman presenting a giant mecha to Sonic, which he amusingly calls Me-Bot. Though it's confusing that it's called a bot because it's actually a mecha he's piloting instead. And then Sonic asks what's that behind him, mentioning a screen, and he says he's not falling for that again. Wait, this is used by a different writer? Eggman explains that the screen behind his robot is broadcasting his anime battle background, which was suggested on his website's message board by a guy with a username called EggFan91. It makes sense that someone like Eggman would establish a website trying to get attention for himself. And nobody takes him seriously as a threat because everyone knows Sonic and his friends can handle him. So that's why it's not backfiring on him. It makes sense that in a free world with the internet and Eggman in it, some people would want to be spectators to Eggman's antics like this, out of curiosity. I doubt anyone's actually rooting for him. This is a joke that couldn't have been done in anything else. Sonic insults the giant mecha for being top-heavy, and spin dash that to make it fall over. And Eggman has to fly out of here while Sonic laughs at him. I don't really buy that Sonic would laugh at him though, because isn't he really used to win against Eggman by now? Easily? How can it be funny when it's not a surprise at all? This is the grumpy Boom Sonic who's bored and tired of Eggman bothering him. At first I kept misreading Eggman as saying he respects every aspect of this, but fortunately no, he said regret, as he looks sad in an overly exaggerated way that's distracting. I like that Sonic defeated it by making it trip. It's less generic and more interesting than him just spin dashing directly at it. I guess it would have just tried to punch Sonic, so maybe we didn't miss out on anything. Then Eggman complains about the fact that someone's berating him on his own blog, saying that Me-Bot's hands are too big, when Eggman worked hard on it. I didn't notice them being too big. He asks why, if he called himself EggFan, he hates everything he does. Well, probably because Eggman fails all the time, so anybody who wants him to succeed would be constantly frustrated with him for losing, and want to provide constructive criticism to help him get better. That'd be the inevitable result of being on his side, not somehow staying positive after all his failures. I get that the panel is just trying to make fun of Sonic fans for being too negative, but it's immediately obvious, even in context, that the fans are justified in complaining. And we could have been given this good message if Eggman had asked that guy this question and gotten a response. He somehow has a fan, which is ridiculous when we don't even know what political ideology Eggman has and how he'd plan to run the world to make people support him after knowing about that. So it's more realistic that he's not actually positive. But I was still baffled the whole time that anyone would give themselves that username in a world with Eggman in it. That'd be begging for them to be insulted. But that never stops real people who support someone worse than him. No one should think there's anything in it for them if Eggman actually wins. Eggman says that he needs a new approach because the whole robot thing isn't working out. And he wishes that a hulking, brutish aggressor occurred in nature, and then realizes that one does, and it's called a gorilla. Just as I was annoyed at how the panel was showing a ton of Eggman in one panel to represent his motion, instead of simply separating it into multiple panels as normal, it's at least lampshaded because Eggman refers to himself in the recent past. And maybe it's justified that Eggman says this in universe because he's being silly out of boredom and a desperation to cheer himself up after all those failures. I'm just wondering why he thinks ordering a gorilla on the internet instead of going to capture one himself right away, easily with his own technology, is the better idea when he'd probably have to spend money to order that gorilla. I guess he pretended to be someone else so that he'd actually get given that gorilla, or no one takes him seriously anyways. It's not like this Robotnik's known for animal abuse. Eggman already took advantage of a gorilla in AOSCH, and that involved him using a brainwashing headband on it. And we saw an extra consequence because not only did it destroy a dam, but we saw that it was separated from its baby son, and he was a character of the whole story. And rather than just wanting to fight Sonic, Eggman had an extra high stakes end goal where he wanted the gorilla to install something on a mountain that could fire a laser at anyone who opposed him, so he could take over the world from intimidation. I'm guessing this story is going to be inferior as a result of lacking all of that extra effort. But since Sonic would hold back against an organic being, I can see where he's coming from and wanting to send a gorilla after Sonic. Then 4 to 6 weeks later, Eggman sees Orbot pull a rope to wheel in a big box, and Eggman asks Cubot if he ordered something stupid again, as he naturally forgot that he ordered something after all that time. I like that Cubot is established to order stuff, like how Bakun orders snacks for himself behind Eggman's back. It's more interesting and gives life to his character. He says no, and Orbot says, "Good save, Cubot," but he's not whispering, so it's dumb that he thinks this wouldn't make Cubot look guilty. He wants the best for him, but he says this out loud. This whole gorilla idea always reminded me of that one issue of Archie. The gorilla gets released, looking tired, just to grab Eggman and slam him into the ground twice, which was already done to Coconuts. At least it's justified this time. I like that Eggman said that he ordered the gorilla 10 evil plans ago, so it's realistic that he didn't do nothing the whole time. But it's not realistic that he expected a gorilla who can't possibly understand him to follow his orders. Well, to be fair, maybe he's a human being racist against Mobians, and so he just assumes it's a sentient gorilla who can understand him. Even if he was sentient, he would do this to him anyways for trying to order him around after he was forced to go to him. It would actually make more sense if he was sentient, because that would explain why he waited until after Eggman tried to order him around before flipping out, instead of doing so the second he was released like I was naturally expecting. My point is, Eggman had no reason to assume this gorilla would follow his orders, sentient or otherwise. Not after the way he was talking about the gorilla before. This makes AOSDH Robotnik look like a brilliant threat, and I called him pathetic, but I've since taken that back because he's way more realistically a menace than him. He looted entire villages. Then the gorilla flips a table, which relatably had milk and cookies on it for Eggman, and Eggman runs away screaming as I'm immediately wondering why the gorilla doesn't just keep trying to attack him. Logically, the gorilla would kill him and this would end the comic. Appropriate for a final issue. But that'd be way too dark. Eggman's nearly the only character in Sonic Boom that's likable. So Eggman runs to Sonic for help, saying they did a bad thing, and of course he only says something like that to mean bad for him. And of course he thinks Sonic will save him because Sonic clearly proved he valued his life a long time ago by not killing him right away. Eggman hands him an issue of this very comic to tell him what he did. Of course there'd be a comic made about something as interesting as Eggman's exploits, especially since everyone knows Sonic can handle him, so he wouldn't be taken seriously enough that someone would rather do something about him. Maybe in-universe, this comic has Eggman planning to order a gorilla on the final panel, and the rest of the story was about a different story entirely. After all, there's no way Eggman would have been able to make a comic about the gorilla antagonizing him on such short notice, like while he was running to Sonic. But the whole time I'm thinking, this joke did more harm than good, because it's just confusing and unnecessary. I guess it makes sense that Eggman would rather hand him a comic than admit what mistake he made himself because it'd be embarrassing. I guess the reason Eggman has a stupid response when Sonic asks him why a gorilla was ordered is that it's been so long since he ordered it that I forgot why he did, since we already told that he forgot he ordered it. Still, it'd be an obvious conclusion to come to that he ordered it because Sonic would hold back against an organic being. So Eggman would have said that, not admit that his plan wasn't brilliant. It would have been. Even in the show, Boom Eggman proved that he's capable of brainwashing because there was an episode where he tried to brainwash everyone in the town by having a mind control device in a room where they'd be watching his movie, and he just forgot to use it. So obviously he would use that against the gorilla. But again, I guess the comic's not canon to the show, and so it's running off the logic that Eggman can't brainwash people. He also brainwashed people with subliminal messages at night from a TV. But of course he didn't have the time to try to brainwash the gorilla because he forgot the crate had a gorilla in it. It's not like his plan wasn't brilliant. He should know that. I like that even a scene later, Eggman still looks bruised and there's a rip in his shirt. So there's consequences to the gorilla attacking him. He's lucky he can get up and run away from it though, so it's not really being realistic. Sonic says that there are professionals to deal with animals running amok. But then the writer forgot to be professional by having a character in the story itself say that in this universe, he guesses that animal control would be an absurd hypocrisy. No, it wouldn't. Of course not. Not if, oh, the gorilla is sentient. So how did Sonic ever think that there are professionals on his planet to deal with animals running amok and think of animal control if this isn't a world where that's the case? So all animals are somehow sentient. That's just needlessly confusing. We live in a world full of humans in it. And when a human runs amok, we call something called the police. Not human control. So when Sonic would call the police, he tells the gorilla that it's back to the zoo for him. See, his world has zoos. So it would obviously have animal control too, because it only have zoos if it had non-sentient animal life. Then there's a twist that actually kind of predicted, because the gorilla is sentient. And he did flip out because Eggman started ordering him around. And because he was stuck in a crate for 2 days. He also apologizes about the mess, talking like a relatable person, and is watching the comedy chimp show on Eggman's couch. He even reveals his name. This is a brilliant issue. There's a creative twist that makes sense. I wish this writer wrote the Archie comic. I did say it'd make more sense if he was sentient because he waited before he flipped out. Sonic says that he should get him home before Eggman comes back, inexplicably expecting Eggman to ever come back. The gorilla, Kyle, says that because he's an internet purchase, this was supposed to be his new home. So he was surprised and mad that he got ordered around. So it's not like he was being sold as a slave then, or he'd be expecting it. So it's more like Eggman agreed to adopt a person. Still, you think that the people sending gorillas out to be adopted by people would get in trouble for trapping them in crates for 2 days. Sonic says that his house might be small for him. It was polite of him to say pleased to meet you, for no apparent reason. Apparently, Kyle tried to move in with Sonic anyways, and he apologizes every time he accidentally inconveniences him, which is far better than Og did in that episode by Flynn, where he didn't even realize he was being annoying or care. So he breaks Sonic's hammock by just lying in it. He's not that heavy, and he trips on a little insect. And there's some unique visual humor because he crashes into the text box of Sonic. Why is there a hashtag on the panel? Anyway, Sonic goes to Tails' workshop to complain because he's got no alone time, and he's destroying everything and eating his food, which would have happened anyways if he was a non-sentient animal, and he captured him and brought him home. But he'd have had no reason to put him in his house if he wasn't sentient. He would have simply gotten him to a zoo. Sonic says that all Kyle does is mooch off him, and Tails is smart enough to advise Sonic to make him get a job because it's his house, his rules. Maybe since he mentioned financial independence earlier, this is supposed to solve Sonic's problem because it'll give him the money to get his own place. And while logically the heroes would have tons of money because of Tails' inventions, and how else can they pay the rent? Just giving him money for his own place, well, it should still happen right away. But they should make sure he can make his own money instead of needing a check from Tails every month for nothing. But yeah, no excuse for the gorilla still living with Sonic at this point. Tails would be rich. Not to mention he could build a house for him. He could use 3D printing to make a house for him in the course of a day. Now that I know how fast homes can be built because of that new technology, in retrospect, the Echidnas really weren't working as fast as they could to build new homes for the dingoes because they should have had the technology to get them all built quickly. I'm guessing that Carl will suck at a job or two to justify the story lasting longer since this is his whole premise. Of course, his clumsiness knocks over a pile of cans he made at the supermarket. And surprisingly, he also got a gig as a stockbroker and said that the spread on shares is so good that it should be illegal. And then it turns out it was, and someone got arrested for fraud, saying a stupid line. This is interesting to see, but it's mostly frustrating because he was somehow that incompetent. We could have been spared from that if he was just a regular gorilla. Also, I guess the reason he's getting jobs so easily is because Sonic was recommending him. He got a job washing windows, but he got threatened by biplanes because he's a gorilla. That's racist. It's not like he's gigantic and holding a kidnapped woman. So, this is the only explanation. That's just not fair. He's clearly washing the window with a cloth. He's also wearing clothes. This is nothing like King Kong. He wouldn't be misunderstood. Then the text box later says that they're right back where they started in Snark's great storytelling. If the writer thought this wasn't great storytelling, he wouldn't have written it that way. So it's not actually sarcasm, it's boasting. And at least the padding was interesting to look at, so it wasn't really bad storytelling, because it wasn't all for nothing. I love that Kyle actually admits that he's no good for anything and feels bad about it instead of being somehow oblivious to forced comedy. Sonic asks him if there's something he always wanted to do. How selfish is Sonic that he didn't ask this right away to make sure he get a job he'd be good at. He says that he's always loved comedy because the writer ran out of creativity and decided to have their new gorilla character just copy Comedy Chimp, because they look alike. So clearly they must be alike. Great message there. I kinda like it, but this was such a predictable route to take that I didn't expect it for a reason. Sonic could have laughed at his clumsiness at some point, and then he could say that he'd be great at comedy. And I'm forced to assume that the in-universe reason for why a light bulb appeared in front of Sonic, and Sonic could use it to fix the lamp, off-screen sadly, was that the Chaos Force magically summoned it on a whim based on his thoughts. What a crazy world if that can happen. Why doesn't that happen every time someone has an idea then? Eggman's base would be full of them. It's not even consistent, so it's just another joke that does more harm than good. This worked with the character in Sonic the Comic because he was based off Bendy from really old cartoons, and so I naturally assumed that was one of his magical powers exclusive to him. It doesn't work for a main character, so he gets a job on Comedy Chimp's show as Slapstick Gorilla. So logically he would do the same type of joke every time and it'd get boring from being predictable. But then again, a different thing happens every time. And that's enough to make Looney Tunes still funny and beloved, regardless of the fact that it's predictable who will win every time. So he breaks some eggs and people laugh, including Eggman, who wants to grill himself because this gorilla was amusing. Okay, how can he possibly forget that backfired on him last time? That gorilla could have killed him. Does he have dementia? Is he literally getting a terrible memory? And this is the final issue of the comic, so for all we know, this is what started happening to him, and that'll be the case from now on. So that is more merciful to the one Eggman sympathetic enough to deserve mercy. He doesn't die or get sent to another dimension. He just goes senile, so he becomes harmless. So maybe that'll lead to him actually getting to be friends with Sonic and his friends as a result, because he forget his grudges and he forget that he wants to take over the town. The only reason he has a grudge against them. Because if he's this forgetful, he won't be able to carry out an entire evil plan. And he probably won't be able to make badniks anymore either. So Eggman will spend his last years playing fuzzy puppies with Amy whenever she visits the retirement home. The heroes would totally be self-righteous enough to be nice to him when they kept helping him in the show. I'm not sure if they wanted me to assume he'd end up senile, but then they shouldn't have made him so forgetful to the point where he's already senile. Because there has to be something seriously wrong with him. And I don't think this is very dark because it would be the happiest possible ending for Eggman. He'd get to have friends besides terrified robots and end up not as hated because he stopped being dangerous for years. Though being forgetful wouldn't cause him to stop being a petty, selfish hedonist. Or about naturally face palms. And the text box actually shares my enthusiasm when I'm told that there's actually another story. It was too soon to end the issue after all. I hope this one has sticks in it. In the next story, Eggman's wearing a hat with a feather in it. That's a nice change of pace. And it's by the same writer. He complains about losing a wireless earpiece that he just bought. Why would Eggman buy something instead of stealing it? And again, Eggman tells him of the near future to look under somewhere. He really is losing it. And Flynn wrote him going insane from losing to Sonic so much, so this isn't completely out of the question for the series. It's just that this is interesting, that's all. Eggman says that the earpiece must have fallen out while he was installing all of those spy cameras around town today. He didn't do that earlier? He asks if that flying squirrel has it, confirming that Ray exists in the town now. But showing him would require effort. And then he says that he forgot he can use these for spying, even though they're called spy cameras and he made them. Okay, it's canon at this point. There's being forgetful, and there's having short-term memory loss. And Eggman's usually in his 50s, and loses to Sonic all the time. Actually, I think I remember that Boom Eggman's a bit younger than that. But he could have gotten a bunch of head injuries in his life too, from having to deal with Sonic all the time. He gets a closer look at the new weapon Tails was working on. Instead of being a weapon that the heroes wouldn't need, it's a dance instructor bot, which has a compliment mode and looks ridiculous. Tails makes me feel sorry for him because he actually wanted to make a robot designed to compliment him for his dancing. I guess he made it a dance instructor by downloading information about dancing into his brain, and he couldn't know all that himself because it'd be too much to memorize and he doesn't have the muscle memory. Since when does Tails want to dance? Combine that with the fact that he compliments him in the same panel when he first shows up, implying that he had no time to see if Tails was a good dancer first. And it looks like he really only built the robot to compliment them. He doesn't have any friends who would shower him with praise all the time, so it makes sense that he'd be that lonely. They tend to be focused on themselves or point out when his inventions are buggy. By the way, the spy camera in Tails' lab is so obvious. It's right behind him too. If Eggman was the one who installed it, he should have spotted it and gotten rid of it immediately. Never mind, it's higher up than him. So he'd have to look up for no reason to look at it, and no one does that. Still, I've seen Eggman make cameras disguised as animals before. There's a stupid line from Eggman because he calls Tails a lunatic for talking to his robots, when obviously he talks to his robots every single day, even in this very issue. He really is forgetful. Wow. I don't remember him being like that in any of the previous issues, let alone the show. But again, it could have a logical explanation, so it's not forced. He sees Amy and she screams, so he wants to study her fighting style. He's really desperate to get anything out of this. How would that benefit him? He should know her fighting style by now. It's just swing a hammer. He could do that. It's so predictable that he doesn't need to learn it because it's always obvious when she's gonna hit something with a hammer. Instead, she's trying to swat at a bug, being in a relatable situation. I like that we see a brand new animal in this version of Mobius, making it feel more like another planet. First we saw an insect so big that a gorilla tripped on it, and now we see a smile bug, which lands on Amy's diary. She just has to wipe the smug look off its face or she's getting the hammer. That's Amy, alright. I was expecting Eggman to want to steal Amy's diary, but instead, he says that he hit another ridiculous dead end. Well, to be fair, what would he actually have to gain in reading Amy's diary? He doesn't know she's into Sonic, and it'd just be predictable. Well, he could still threaten to reveal his secrets to everyone. How does he see a book with a lock on it and not realize the value of it? Really? That shouldn't have been drawn. Well, since Eggman says that maybe Sonic stole it, here's why he says it was a dead end. This reminded me that he wasn't spying on people to spy on them and fill in the emotional void in his life, but to find his missing earpiece. No wonder I forgot that, because he always spies on people anyways for a reason other than this, and he should be assuming his missing earpiece is in his base. He would be looking at his base. I guess he looked everywhere. Wait, is his earpiece on him? Is that the twist? That he forgot he still has it on him? Well, people do forget that they have their glasses on their head, so that's not too confusing. Oh, come on, why does Kyle have to bother Sonic? Isn't it bad enough he was in the previous story? At least he apologizes for waking him up. Then he wants to show him a new bit and he throws a pie at his face. That's his way of thanking him for getting him his job? Why does he keep apologizing if he's like this? Wouldn't he just tell Sonic what his new bit was? I naturally assumed he'd be out of Sonic's life forever. He would notice the out of it after all the trouble he caused him. But to be fair, he doesn't have any friends. I guess he got lonely and could only think of Sonic to talk to. The point is, we didn't need this annoyance. Since he asked Sonic to hang out with him before this, maybe the reason he threw a pie at him was to punish him for choosing to nap over spend time with someone. He's the hero of the town, he can nap if he wants. Maybe he doesn't sleep very well at night. Eggman naturally says that's hilarious because he hates Sonic, and asks Orbot to bring him a pie. I guess the reason I didn't think it was hilarious was that Sonic didn't have a really over-the-top reaction to it. He didn't react relatably at all, he just asked to go to sleep. We didn't even see him have to wipe the pie off his face. Maybe that's why it wasn't funny. Because it had no real consequences. Oh no, he has to wipe pie off his face. He didn't give a shit. He wonders if he lost his earpiece when he bought his new hat. Is he only able to hear what's on the other end of the cameras because he's wearing his earpiece? Knuckles says he wants a hat, but fears commitment. I like how self-aware he is there. Then he walks around wearing tons of hats at once, which no one would do. Especially since the hats would obviously all fall off. They already look in the process of falling off. And he asked him to keep the brown fedora, saying that only an idiot would wear that. If he had been insulting the star-speckled hat he was wearing, I would have said fuck you. But instead, he's actually referring to Eggman's hat. Seriously, I'm so glad the star hat was referenced. It reminded me of the hat Knuckles had in Archie they got from Hawking, and of the fact that OVA Knuckles wore a hat. And we can assume he'll wear this hat from now on, because this is the final issue. It would have been funny if we saw all those hats fall off, but they don't. Also, I'm surprised that... I've already known the word fedora for quite some time, but I'm surprised Knuckles knows that word, if he's so stupid. He would just call it a hat. Eggman gets so offended from Knuckles that he throws the hat on the floor, even though I like seeing a main character look a bit different for once. I don't care what kind of hat it is. And right away I thought that it was hypocritical of Buffles to call anyone an idiot, let alone so easily. He's not the right person to talk on this. At least this line was put in the mouth of someone that you're supposed to think is a complete idiot. But I still think the writer was using him as his mouthpiece. But still, that's the worst mouthpiece ever. Eggman says that there's only one main character left. Well, there's a comic about Sonic in Universe. He decides to spy on Styx. And I love that her paranoia is taken advantage of because she would spy on him. And so she catches him. Oh god, I'm gonna miss Styx so much. I hope she escapes Sonic Boom and gets to show up in the games. She was in an Olympics game, so there's no excuse. Because there's so much that can be done with paranoia, which makes her an interesting character. She always has my attention with her dialogue, because you never know what's going to come out of her mouth. And she's a girl. Espio could be paranoid too, but he'd never be able to fill her shoes without being called out of character. She may be confusing, but no other character in the series is like her. She at least has a really strong, memorable personality. It actually leaves an impression on me. I wonder why Styx was able to spy on Eggman anyways. Did she steal one of Eggman's cameras? Sadly, Eggman turns off the spy cameras right away. Well, I should have expected that. She is his enemy and would annoy him. So we'd rather shut it off and avoid dealing with her. But it's a shame that in the final issue, Styx is practically just a cameo. Eggman steps on his earpiece, crunching it, and memorably says that he's the angriest man who ever lived. That's entertaining, as is him immediately cheering up because the doorbell rings for the pizza he ordered. It humanizes him that he ordered pizza, but it's weird that the text bubble earlier was in black and red when he's not a robot. Maybe he is, and he briefly said it in a robotic voice. That would make more sense than him being fully human since he survived so much slapstick. I'm guessing this isn't the pizza for the predictable twist. How did he expect to get pizza delivered to him when he lives on a separate island? I guess there's a boat. I'm definitely gonna miss Boom Eggman's personality. Not his incompetence. Like he can't even shoplift correctly. But this is the only Eggman I can really tolerate as a person. Because he is a person, not just a monster. Common sense would dictate that they'd learn from Boom's strength from now on, and this would be how Eggman would be everywhere. Especially in all the comics. But no, instead I couldn't care less about Eggman. Then turns out that he ordered Gorilla again, which was actually foreshadowed earlier, and I'm surprised she showed up in a separate story from it. And it's variety that it's a girl instead. And the gorilla slams him around and starts destroying things, this time with no actual provoking. Well, to be fair, maybe the gorilla has heard about how destructive Eggman is and is just punishing him for it. But it sucks that most of the slapstick is left off screen. How is that supposed to be funny? And since this is the final panel ever, and we never see him get out of that situation alive, it could be possible that this is how he dies. Because there's no story after this. I still rather believe that he just lost his short-term memory though, like he clearly has by this issue. Because that would lead to him still being able to live the rest of his life, and being harmless. So he doesn't have to be gotten rid of for there to be a happy ending to the series. Wait, the Smile Ball can talk? And Amy still wanted to crush you with a hammer? This issue is by Sam Freeberger. So of course it ended up being a fantastic story that left me really sad that the comic had to end. This guy should have written the whole comic. It was about Eggman ordering a sentient gorilla and being bothered by him because he forgot he ordered him weeks ago, and released him without making sure he could brainwash him right away. So after he logically turns out to be sentient, he stays with Sonic and turns out to be clumsy and heavy to the point of damaging his furniture. And his clumsiness means he sucks at every job he's given too, which got forced by the end. But it was interesting to see what I expected to be just a regular gorilla actually be a person who got various relatable jobs. This was a creative twist that makes sense. They went the lazy route when he got a job in comedy because he's kind of a chimp too. Kyle annoyed me by the end, but he's better than Og because he apologizes a lot. And the second story was taking full advantage of the fact that Eggman tends to spy on people by taking it to its logical conclusion, to the point where Styx was spying on Eggman. I love that. But I'm not sure if Eggman actually was wearing the earpiece the whole time. If it was always on his floor, he should have just seen it immediately. The whole story wouldn't have happened. Or maybe it would have, because we didn't need this kind of plot to be justified by him looking for an earpiece. I remember this comic as having a bad track record with story quality. So of course the universe taunts me by having its last issue be great, leaving me frustrated at the end. But at least experiencing the story was interesting and not a stressful chore I had to force myself through. I didn't want it to end. At least Boom is unique. But now I'm going to be stuck with just like the games comics, which don't even try to have charm. About the only complaint I really have about this issue is that, well, aside from the fact that the title is a spoiler, the sound effect writer was not taking his job seriously and broke me out of it, especially when he wrote Solve for Why. The real big complaint I have, that I originally planned on saying earlier, was that Styx barely shows up, when she's the whole reason I looked forward to this issue. But the stories as a whole made up for it, and she was used perfectly when she did show up.